Welcome everybody to the SAP Analytics Cloud Sales Performance Management webinar. Just recently joined the SAP crowd and really excited to start developing some of these solutions as it's really not prevalent in the SAP world to have solutions coming in out of BDC or SAC that cater to planning for sales. I'm going to go ahead and flip through the PowerPoint that I have up here, and I'll go ahead and do a demo a little bit later in the presentation. But the agenda for today is really just to introduce you to not only myself, but to PlaniFi and SimpleFi and really what we do. Then we'll talk about sales performance management process, doing an overview of the end-to-end of planning, talking about where Excel fails and how SimpleFi and SAP Business Data Cloud can help. And for those of you that are new to maybe some terms around SAP, so Business Data Cloud is the new go forward that's kind of inclusive of a lot of different platforms, including SAC and others that we'll go through as we go through this presentation. And then we also have the SimpleFi roadmap for SPM, as well as the demo for sizing and scoring, and then a Q&A session at the end here. So with that, I'll go ahead and proceed here to talk about who we are. All right, so as far as who we are as a firm, so we're a partner of SAP. We focus on business process design, business content, and automation and implementation of SAP planning, analytics, and consolidations. We touch pretty much every area of the planning, whether it's supply chain, finance, or sales. We kind of have lived it and done it, and our team has a lot of experience and a lot of years working in SAP platforms as well as other platforms. And we're one of the few partners that actually is creating some of the best content out there for our end users to be able to take advantage of. So we are the go-to SAP partner for analytics and planning. We always strive for 100% referenceable engagements with our clients. And we have offices in Canada and the United States and customers across all industries and geographies. So, like I said, business services, technology, platforms. And if you look down here at the focus, so we have, the analytics, data warehousing, consolidations, DataSphere, group reporting, and BPC, BW, HANA, and Business Data Cloud is kind of encompassing some of those platforms and the new terminology. So with that said, I'll go ahead and get to my introduction. So who am I? So I'm Keith Jackson. I have been in consulting for about 12 years. So I really started my journey into consulting. I worked for Hewlett-Packard before for about 15 years in various areas of the business. In the last probably 3-4 years there, I was in sales performance management area, specifically in doing territory and quota and running projects in that area. And during that time, Anaplan was just becoming a platform. Like literally they had 10 people working for them at the time that they started with us. And so I got really interested in what it could do because for the first time, I didn't have to have IT do a lot of heavy lifting. Like I could build stuff in Anaplan and be able to be successful. That led me to actually joining Anaplan and going into consulting there. I left Anaplan after a few years and started at a consulting firm and have done over 100 successful SPM implementations since then. In various platforms such as Anaplan and Excel, and now SAP. So, looking forward to taking this to where it can go. Very familiar with the functionalities that it has and what it could do for you because, there's some certain advantages to having SAP being the system for doing your planning, and that a lot of you probably have SAP backends and systems with your data that we can connect to much more quickly and easily because it's native with SAC. So with that said, let's jump into SPM process. So this might be a little bit small for all of you, but hopefully you can see it. I'm going to talk to this for probably about the next 5-10 minutes. But really, SPM is the process of not only the yearly planning, but then measuring those results throughout the year and making changes and adapting to our plans as we go through changes in our business. So, we have people join us, we have people leave us, we have customers join, we have customers attrit, we have all sorts of business dynamic changes. We could have new product introductions that happen and disrupt our plans. We could have supply chain constraints, etc. So really, where do we start? And I'm going to kind of tell you about where I started at HP, and that was really we were living in a world of Excel. That's really all we had at the time. There was no system. We were a technology company. It seems kind of funny that we didn't have a system for this, but we didn't. We used Excel for everything. And we were planning for about, I think it was around 60,000 reps at the time, and probably had hundreds of people involved in the planning process. So you can imagine how many versions of the spreadsheet got sent out and then sent back and then consolidated and then had to go through and dedupe and find the conflicts and talk to people and figure out what's going to be the plan for the year. So we spent a tremendous amount of time doing all of this and gathering information. And on top of it, not all of our planners from the different business units at the time would actually get their data from the same systems. So we had a problem with a source of truth. And so, we have inputs coming from finance for the fiscal year plan. So they're saying this is what we're telling the street we're going to hit. So sales, from there, you need to figure out what you need to do. And then there's also outputs to revenue forecast from the sales forecast. Those are things that should be happening in a normal company. The sales forecast informs the revenue forecast. And then outputs to CRM for updated account assignments. So our CRM, we use Salesforce, and it was, worked fine for what it did, but we were feeding it from Excel every year. And then every month, whenever there were changes to account assignments, we'd have to feed it another feed to change the accounts to the new owners. So long story short, there's a lot of inputs to this process, but it really goes around the products, the revenue or bookings, sales rep data, customer data, HR data, opportunity data, as well as other like third-party information. A lot of companies that I've worked with have information from third parties about their accounts, such as maybe a propensity score or a share of wallet or total addressable market information about their accounts. But to start the kind of process walkthrough here, I would say sizing and scoring. Hopefully you guys can see my little mouse pointer here. Sizing and scoring is kind of the first area that I would say should be the best practice of most companies. And so as we talk through this, there's really the strategic high-level planning that happens at a company. Then there's the detailed planning that happens. And then there's the execution that happens around that. And so I would say sizing and scoring, segmentation, and capacity planning are really the strategic activities that happen. It's done more at a macro level. And we'll actually walk through an example of sizing and scoring a little bit later in the demonstration. But coming out of that sizing and scoring activity, sorry, let me explain what that is. So sizing is saying, okay, this is kind of the bets that I'm placing the next year for all my accounts. I have historical information about them. I have opportunity information about them. And forward looking, like what's my general census as a person that says, I'm going to place this bet for this account or this group of accounts for next year. And so that really should be feeding in from your sales forecasting process if it was all connected, like this shows on the diagram here. Unfortunately, a lot of companies, they do a sales forecasting process, but that isn't really the starting point for doing territory and quota. Ultimately, territory and quota just becomes a matter of, hey, I'm going to go gather data from various spots, and I'm going to try to put it together and come up with the best plan to be able to meet that financial target that was handed to me from finance. And the reason I put this together is because this is something that I've learned over the past 12 years at consulting with companies, because a lot of companies are doing that. They're very broken and disparate in their processes, and they're not connecting them together, even though the data may be there. part of the problem is most companies are using Excel still. And so when you have a territory and quota process happening for the year, like you're planning out your next fiscal year for sales, how are you going to decide who gets what accounts, who gets what targets, and a lot of time is spent with doing that. And when you have many groups within your organization, like they're all thinking they're doing it their own way, but typically, once we sit down and go through requirements with everybody, everybody's pretty much doing the same thing. The problem is the data sources are different. And so harmonizing those and getting the single data source together is one of the biggest lifts. But through that 12 years, what I've discovered is that companies, most of them do sizing and scoring activities and segmentation activities, as well as capacity planning, but it doesn't connect to territory and quota. If you're doing those three activities up front, by the time you get to territory and quota, it's kind of minimalistic as to what you have to do, because sizing and scoring has two outputs. One being the revenue projections for the planning year. That's going to help me in my segmentation exercise. So by placing the bet, I can tell whether the account's going to graduate or be demoted within my segments. So if, using a simplistic example, if I have 4 segments of key, enterprise, mid-market, and SMB, what you're going to notice over time with accounts is that in one year they may be a mid-market, and the next year they're an enterprise account, and maybe they go up to a key account, but maybe they start declining again because maybe they've bought everything that they need from you. So that process is really important, segmentation, to be able to make sure that you have the right accounts with the right reps, because if you have an enterprise rep that has a declining account, number one, they're not going to be able to meet their target. And then as well, the account is probably getting more attention than it deserves, because the enterprise reps typically have fewer accounts than a mid-market or SMB rep. And so it depends upon how much you want to invest into the touch that each of your AEs have with their clients. It really depends upon the segmentation process, because you can make sure that you have the right number of accounts in the right segment. It also helps with load balancing as far as like average number of accounts per rep. So you should have KPIs in your process that allow you to say, for every key account rep, they should have no more than 3 accounts. For every enterprise rep, they have no more than 7 to 10. For every mid-market, no more than 20, etc., down through the hierarchy. So once you've gone through the segmentation exercise, that feeds into the territory process, because you have territories that are linked to a rep of a certain type, usually, in most companies that I've worked with. Meaning I have SMB reps, I have mid-market reps, etc. And if I graduate an account and I leave it in the same territory, number one, that account may not get the attention it deserves because the mid-market rep doesn't have the capacity to spend more time on that account. Number two, that mid-market rep may crush their quota because they have a huge account in there, and it wasn't taken away from them and graduated to a enterprise rep. So you have account movements coming out of the segmentation exercise. And this is kind of like year over year, you don't want to disrupt your relationships with the customers as much as you can. That would be the preference in a best practice planning process. So if you have customers that are getting disrupted every year, how do you build relationships with them? How do you get deeper in the business with them? And the short answer is, well, you don't. Those relationships have to be reformed with the new rep. Going back to the scoring and sizing, what comes out of there that feeds into territory is really our account scores and potential, which is going to help us when we get to territory. So have those two outputs from segmentation and from account, or from sizing and scoring, feeding into our territory. But now I'm going to skip over to capacity planning real quick, because that's logically the next step in the process. Because at this point, we probably have an idea from finance of what our targets are for the year, for each of our, whether we go to market by line of business or, product or rep type, right? So a lot of companies do organize around hey, this is the enterprise number, this is the mid-market number, this is SMB number. Others look more like a Rubik's Cube, to where it's, okay, this is the enterprise target, but it's broken out by your different product lines. And then from there, you go down to the accounts and kind of figure it out from there. But in capacity planning, what you're looking at is, hey, how many heads do I have in each of my areas? And what's their productivity? And what do I need to do in order to meet the numbers? So if I have a capacity for a rep, say I have 10 enterprise reps, and my number given to me from finance is, let's say, $1 million for those 10 reps. That means that if my capacity for each rep is only $80,000, I don't have enough capacity, and I either need to increase the productivity on the rep from saying, rather than capacity of 80,000, I need 100,000 from you to be able to meet that $1 million number, or I need to be able to hire reps, which also takes into account, well, new reps need time to ramp. So you have a ramping profile for them. So how many reps do I need to hire to be able to hit that $1 million target by the end of the year? And it's kind of like levers in two directions at once that you can use to do that. You can choose to both increase the productivity of a rep by, let's say, rather than 80,000, we want to bring them to 90,000. So we do that, and then we also hire another rep or two. And with the ramp of the reps, by the end of the year, we should be able to hit our targets. So what comes out of that whole capacity planning process is a couple other items. So number one, we have targets for the top level of our organization, or how we go to market. And we also have new or deleted territories, because maybe during capacity planning, I found out that I had too many reps, because the capacity came out that, hey, I'm going to exceed the target with this many heads. And so I get rid of some of the organization in the yearly planning process. And again, this is the high level planning that companies do on a yearly basis. I know, for example, just today, Intel made an announcement that they're laying off a tremendous number of people, and likely some of those are going to be sales reps, to where they're going to have to delete the territories, and that in fact releases the accounts that are assigned to those territories back to the general availability. And then now we're talking about territory. So territory, I spoke about how most accounts usually year over year, unless they get graduated or demoted to another segment, or if they got added through the process of getting rid of some people in the organization, like, they're usually claimed. So territory shouldn't be that big of an exercise, but what you do need to look at is, we've now got account scores and potential for our accounts. So that gives us one piece of information, and we have a list of available accounts within each of our segments as well. So when I look at a team of reps, if I'm a manager and I have 5 reps reporting to me, I would like to have what's called an equitable territory for my reps, for my sales reps. Why would I want that? Well, because one, I want to maximize what my team can produce. If I have a rep that has a account score total of, let's say, 90, and I have another one with a score of 30, well, the person with 90 has a lot more potential to hit their number, because number one, the account score is higher and they have more potential. It's kind of directly correlated, and the sizing and scoring will kind of show you how that correlates when we go through that demonstration a little bit later. But the other part is looking across my team. Am I giving everybody a fair chance at being able to hit their number? Because the other part is, it's expensive to hire new reps. Why? Because they have to train them. They have to get ramped into their profile, and they have to build those relationships again. So we want to minimize disruption by giving our teams the opportunities to be able to hit their quotas. So in the territory process, what we should be doing ideally is really just reassigning accounts and trying to balance out our teams so that we don't have lopsided views across our teams. Once we have that, we can get into our updated territory potentials, which feeds into our quota. So now we've got our tops down level, and we have our bottoms up that we've just done by doing all of our territory assignments. And essentially, there's 2 ways to go about setting quotas now. A lot of companies that are maybe small enterprise to mid-market and below, they usually use one of two methodologies that's really not account based. So the larger the companies get, the more I see this more account based, where we have this bottoms up and we have a tops down. And what we do, we enter the tops down, and that ratably splits throughout our entire sales organization to the bottom. And then managers are allowed to do a little tweaking, but it's really more of an account derived based quota, except for maybe mid market and SMB, where it's more of a team based quota. But what I've seen companies that are kind of in that smaller to mid range do is the role based quota or a hunter quota. So a role based quota would mean every one of my mid market reps has a quota of $500,000, and every one of my enterprise reps has a quota of, let's say $3 million. And essentially, what we're doing in the quota area and the territory area is saying, hey, did I assign enough account potential to my rep to be able to meet this quota that they got for their role? And then the other way to think about it is, if I'm a hunter, if I have all new accounts, I have no history with the accounts, I have to go get every one of my opportunities. Then what kind of quota am I going to set for them? And usually that's a look at historicals, like what they do last year and what can we get more of this year. So adding a growth rate for a hunter type role is often used in the companies that I've seen, and I think those work well. And then when you start growing bigger, you can maybe switch your enterprise and key to being more of an account-based quota, and you can do all those within one system. You don't need multiple spreadsheets to be able to do this. You just need to be able to set up your system to do what it needs to do right. So once we've done quota, we now go over to the output, right? So the output for this is really our quota and plans by rep. And what gets that? Our incentive compensation system, or Excel if you're using that. So incentive comp is where we're getting in all the transactions from the ERP system, and then crediting those against the rep that has possession of the account at the time of the sale. So there's lots of rules that generally go around this. There's components in the plans that are applicable, eligibility requirements, et cetera, that need to be met. So there's a lot of logic that goes into there. And this is where I could see DataSphere having a good impact in the future, to where we use DataSphere to kind of credit everything and then figure out what the payment should be against the plan. And then we could use SAC for more of the viewing by the reps to see, okay, how am I progressing on my commissions for this month? And then also giving them the ability to go in and have calculators in there to be able to say, okay, here's all my opportunities I have. If I close deals 1, 2, and 3 by the end of the month, I'm going to hit this accelerator, and this could be my potential payout based upon what I've already closed for the month and what I want to close by the end of the month. So, all that to say, now we have our incentive compensation and our payments figured out. We're going on to sales forecasting, so sales management needs to continually give their sales forecast so that revenue can be forecasted for a company and feedback into finance. So that's kind of completed the whole entire circle. And I'll pause here. Are there any questions on the phone before we move on? No? Okay, perfect. So next, sales planning process disconnects. So as I talked through the process earlier, the scoring and sizing of customers, the segmentation, capacity planning, territory, and quota, that's all on the strategy side. So we're doing planning over there. On the execution side, it's really about measuring what we just planned for. So our incentive compensation, how are we performing against a plan for our sales forecast, in-year changes for territory and quota. So that means, I have a new rep join, or I have accounts that need to be reassigned for whatever reason, as well as integration to financial model inputs and outputs to the revenue forecast. Where does Excel fail in all this? So this is based upon my experience. I could probably list at least another 20 more items here, but I picked out kind of the key ones. So from a strategy planning side, we have fewer planners in three of the areas and more planners in territory and quota. And when that happens, you are spending more time doing more consolidations and more conflicts when all that data comes back together. So what are those failure points? Having multiple copies of the Excel file, right? So think about, I started out this webinar talking about Hewlett Packard and we had 60,000 reps. We had hundreds of people involved in the planning, whether it was managers or sales ops. And there were a ton of copies of these files. And so, sure, they had formulas in them, but it doesn't mean that people won't override them or make up their own data to put in them either. So that is what I would call a different basis being used for copies. So different data sources due to the limitations of Excel. There's a lot of openness to be able to do a lot of things in there that aren't natural to a planning process because you can't control it. It's really just you get the file back and then you get to deal with the results of it. And then consolidating all that after planning is a headache. It can take absolutely weeks worth of time if you have a larger organization to consolidate everything and then, be able to filter out all the different conflicts that need to be resolved. And the conflicts mean more meetings. So getting both parties that send in the same answer together and say, hey, who's going to win on this? And then escalating when they can't agree upon that. It also takes away from the time to do planning. So, deadlines are always tight when you're using Excel to do sales planning because you're spending so much time going out and acquiring data, normalizing it, getting into a format, sending it out to get answers, and then you just don't have time to actually sit down and put thought and analysis into your planning. And then lack of visibility to balance territories. So, if you don't really set up your spreadsheet well, sure, you could see everybody has 5 accounts and you have five more to assign, but do you have those KPIs of saying what is my average score across my territory or across my territories for my team, and what is the average revenue potential for each of my accounts across my territory for my team? With the system, you can quickly have it give you those answers as you're doing the planning, so you can assign out accounts to your territories and see what the impact was to the not only the account score but the revenue potential. And then as well, higher level planning is not connected because those spreadsheets that are being used in every single process are a silo everywhere. They're not connected from a data level at all, and that's where SAC and the schema that it uses, like all your data is connected and you can see things over time so that you can actually see changes and track them if that's important to you, but it allows you to have that flexibility to have the single source of truth for all data, and so it doesn't get manipulated by end users as they're doing their planning. Try and advance the slide here. Hold on. There we go. So how can BDC or SAC help? One, we connect the process using a single source of truth for the data. SAC can connect to any of your SAP systems as well as databases. It doesn't have to be SAP systems that are the source of data, but most companies that I've seen have a data lake that is the source of truth. And if that's where we connect, great. Then we have one place, and we're not going to be changing that data in our planning process. And guided experience, that's super important. So being a new planner in a company is really a difficult position. They're getting a spreadsheet and they're being told, hey, go do this, but they don't have the spreadsheet explained to them. There could be 50 different fields in there. Using something like SAC, you can have a guided experience that really tailors to everybody in the company that does that role as a user. It's built together rather than an array of separate spreadsheets. All the data is common. And then as well, and I think one of the biggest parts of this, eliminating that manual creation of planning forms. So going out and acquiring it and then consolidating it back together. That's a lot of time saved for companies to be able to really spend that time on analyzing and planning, which is what they were hired to do. So, I always talk about with my clients, it's funny that we hire what we call analysts at companies because we really hire people to compile spreadsheets a lot of the times. and we don't do a lot of analyzing or planning. So that's how a system can help you. It can also be adapted as your organization changes and grows. So maybe you have new plans coming on for the new year, or new products. Maybe you want to do things a little bit differently, and that's where I think in the demo today is one example, just in sizing and scoring, how you can change things year over year, or even region over region. And then finally, I'll say the native connection with SAP systems as well as Databricks. So looks like we're doing pretty good on time, but I do want to get to the demo. Just real quick, this is a screenshot of what we're going to be seeing today, and I've just put a little bit of status because I wanted to make sure everybody saw where we're at on our build progress. So we have completed the sizing and scoring for the most part. Segmentation, capacity, territory, and quota are in progress. Incentive compensation will be a future build out. And we do have a sales forecasting model already. So we have a lot of great content that if you're interested in, reach out. Be happy to set up a session and take you through all these. And look forward to being able to release the next 4, hopefully in the next quarter or so, or less. And so with that, I'm going to go ahead and end the show here, and we're going to go to SAC and actually see this in action. Just get logged in there. Of course, I get timed out. All right. All right, is there a way for you guys to do a thumbs up or anything to see if, can you see SAP? All right, thanks, Dan. So this is kind of the launch pad of everything to do with sales planning. So ultimately, we want to connect all of our data in here and be able to use that for our planning process. So the one we're going to look at today is the customer sizing and scoring, like I said. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that. And that takes us to the process. So I'm going to kind of explain this as we go through it, but I'm going to kind of start at the end here so that you can understand what I'm talking about. So one of the ways I've seen for sizing and scoring is really to take a look at all of our accounts. And right now I'm looking at all of Americas. So you can see I have thousands of accounts lined up in here. And what I have is all the historicals as well as forecast information for the accounts, whether it's fiscal year -1, current year revenue plus exit, current year opportunity amount, current year propensity score, and then the forecasted value for the sales planning year. So I've already ran a data action in here to go ahead and calculate it out for the enterprise segment. So there's only a few in the Americas that are enterprise in this example model. But basically, I'll speak to that in a little bit. But what I want to bring to your attention are these buckets here. So current year -1 is last year. So we're in 2025. This would be 2024. You could also have 2023. You could have a 3-year average. There's different components to it. We have information about our accounts. Where are they located? What industry are they in? What segment are they in? Who owns the account right now? What's the name of it, etc. So a lot of information can be looked at, but now we need to get to our sizing and scoring exercise. And in order to size and score an account, I'm going to talk about scoring first. So it's a little bit complex, but I'm going to try to make it as easy as possible. So if I'm setting up what I call bands, I want to say, okay, for fiscal year -1 revenue. This is all of my opportunity or all of my historical information about these accounts, right? And so if I want to set up a band for this, if I look at only enterprise, and I take away the mid-market here and the SMB, so I'm looking at enterprise. So it looks like I'm ranging between 500,000 down to 435,000. Okay, so basically I'm saying anything 430,000 and up, I want to be an enterprise if I want to move some of my accounts. And then if I unclick that and I go take a look at a mid-market, collapse these there. Okay, so looking at the mid-market, I can look at my ranges here, and it looks like, you know, I down to about 1,000, all the way up to maybe 10, maybe some biggers in there. There's 11,000, 13,000, and I could sort all this and just kind of figure out my ranges, because ultimately what I want to do is back here, I want to come up with my ranges. So based upon each of the buckets, right? So I have a bucket of current year revenue plus exit. I have a bucket of opportunity amount times the propensity score. I have a bucket of the forecasted value for the year, and I have a 3-year average revenue bucket. I want to be able to get a low and a high for the year, and I'm showing 2025, but I should only be showing 2026. There we go. So I want to be able to set up ranges so that basically that value that exists, I want to look up and say, what band level am I in? Okay, am I a 1, 2, 3, or a 10? So that's, you know, part of the planning process is to be able to set those up and do them for each of our different bucket types, right? You see the amounts are maybe a little bit different in this one. The forecast looks pretty much the same, but you get the idea. So most of our SMB accounts, they're going to fall probably in the 1, 2, maybe 3 range. And for mid-markets, they're going to be probably 4s and 5s. And then our enterprise are probably going to be 6, 7s, 8s, somewhere around there. And then our key accounts are going to be 9s and 10s. And what we want to do by setting up all the bands here is that we're going to, on the next screen here, is the score weight. I'm actually going to go back to the Launchpad. So we have the band levels, we have the score weight, and then we have the growth. So if I go to the score weight, I'm able to say for the Americas, out of these 4 buckets, I want to give different weightings to each of these buckets to determine the account score ultimately for the customer. And so if I look at current year revenue plus exit, right, and I have $1 million account, well, if I go back to my band level and current year revenue plus exit, so my account has $1 million, it's a 10 right now, right? Because it's over $1 million. And with that said, I can then go back to my score weight, calculate out what the account score is going to be. So it's going to take the 50% of the 10, so you're going to have the 5. You're going to have a 10 of the opportunity amount and propensity score. So if that also came in as a 10 on its scale, then you would have a 1. And then if you had this, you would have a 4 for the forecast value if it came in at a 10 on the scale. So for that account, it would have a total account score of a 10. Usually what you'll see is that one of these categories is maybe a little bit lower, as well as it's going to be different region by region. Because if you think about, let's say we were thinking about an American company that started here and then started expanding internationally. Current year revenue plus exit is probably going to be a better indicator for a more mature market than some of these others. Maybe 3-year average should be involved in there as well. But if I'm an emerging market, if I just started in APJ, for instance, this year, for them, I almost guarantee that the opportunity amount and propensity score is going to be way more important for them, because that's the business that they're trying to pull in. It's not business that they already have. They don't have a lot of business because they just started there. So being able to weight these different buckets is really what helps companies plan, and they can change year over year. So, you know, as you start seeing some of the reporting around this, You could make changes. So maybe going into 2026, planning for 2027, maybe we want to change the percentages to where we go, 40, 20, 20, and 20. If that adds up. Yeah, it does. Good. You got the math right. But the importance is you have the flexibility year over year to change your mind on how you plan. Same goes for if we're talking about segmentation or some of the capacity planning. You'll see that when we have models that are set up properly, you have levers that you can change year over year. They're not hard coded. They're not set, and we're not locked into the accounts as either, or buckets, right? So if we wanted to start measuring opportunities amounts, or not opportunity amounts, but booking amounts, as an example, we could do that, and we could put some weight on there for the next year and use that as one of the criteria. So going back to Launchpad, the final one we're going to look at is the growth here. And so growth is really where we're looking at a region level and saying, okay, for all my key accounts within the Americas region, I have a growth target of 20% this year. For enterprise, I put in 50%, but you know what? I've changed my mind. That's just not achievable because that's a super huge number. So I'm going to go ahead and lower that to 10%. Mid-market is 20%, and SMB, let's say 20% as well. We're getting a lot of new customers in that size of the market. So, this is a very simple calculation. Excel could do this very well, but now we have it in the system, and that when applied, so going back to the landing page here, we have some calcs here that we can run. And when we press this button, what happens is that the data is calculated, and then we have our report view that we can go in and we can look and say, okay, what came out of that? And so if I was to look at just enterprise as an example here, right? These are my accounts, and the account score is not finished on this page yet, so that's missing. But we can see our forecasted value is the amount we put times the percentage based upon the current year plus the growth percentages. So that end to end is really what we're trying to accomplish and what will be coming out very soon. But yeah, that's kind of the presentation for today. So I will ask if there's any questions at this point. I'm sorry, if you have a question, I think you might need to put it in the chat. All right. Well, if there's no questions, we'll go ahead and wrap up the call for today. If there's any follow-up questions, do feel free to reach out. Happy to have a discussion as well. Thank you very much.